12 countries, 12 different battlefields, one sport that unites them all: mixed martial arts. From the favelas of Brazil to the icy mountains of Russia, from Mexico's boxing rings to America's wrestling mats, every region has shaped the fight game in its own way. And together they built the MMA you see today. Starting with Canada, the Blueprint Nation. Before MMA became global, one fighter from Montreal showed the world what complete really meant: Georges St-Pierre. GSP didn't invent wrestling, karate, or jiu-jitsu, but he fused them with such precision that the sport itself shifted. Canadian MMA grew from his shadow, disciplined, calculated, and obsessed with fundamentals. At its heart, Canadian style isn't chaos, it's control. Fighters approach the cage like it's a chessboard. Distance management, well-timed takedowns, sharp jabs, and always a plan for the next phase. Where other regions rely on raw aggression or heritage combat sports, Canada leans on preparation. You'll see fighters mix karate stance footwork with double-leg takedowns, ground and pound softened by submission attempts, and a constant awareness of scoring. It's not about flash, it's about efficiency. What makes Canadian MMA distinct is its balance. Strikers learn wrestling, wrestlers learn striking, everyone learns jiu-jitsu. The gyms across Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver built reputations on producing fighters who can handle every phase, never getting stuck in one dimension. GSP was the symbol, but others like Rory McDonald carried the same DNA: long-range striking, smooth transitions, and a clinical ability to pick opponents apart without ever fighting reckless. Canadian fighters often get labeled as game plan heavy, but that's not a weakness, it's their strength. They don't fight the opponent's fight, they make you fight theirs. Cold efficiency, calm under pressure, and technique over emotion. In Canada, MMA isn't just a brawl, it's a science. And the legacy of that philosophy is why Canadian fighters, even when quiet, are always dangerous. Brazil, the art of chaos. Before the UFC had weight classes, gloves, or even real rules, Brazil was already experimenting with a raw version of combat called Vale Tudo. Literally, anything goes. No rounds, no judges, no mercy. What looked like street fights to outsiders was actually the birthplace of a philosophy. At the center of it all was the Gracie family. While the rest of the world was focused on punching and kicking, the Gracies were perfecting Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a system that turned technique into a weapon against size and strength. They proved that leverage and positioning could topple giants. When Royce Gracie walked into UFC 1 wearing what looked like a bathrobe, nobody knew what was coming. By the time he was done, the world knew that ground fighting wasn't just an option, it was essential. BJJ became the backbone of modern MMA. But Brazil didn't stop at the ground game. They blended in their own version of Muay Thai, faster, wilder, and more explosive than its traditional form. Thai fighters often wait for the perfect shot. Brazilians? They throw spinning elbows, flying knees, and wild kicks until the fight turns into a storm. Charles Oliveira is the modern blueprint, the record holder for most submission wins in UFC history. He grapples like a python, but strikes like a man possessed. He's been knocked down countless times, only to rise smiling through blood and finish with a choke. And then there's Jose Aldo, the king of leg kicks. Aldo made careers vanish with a single weapon, chopping legs until opponents could barely stand. His takedown defense turned wrestlers into desperate strikers, and his pressure defined a generation. Brazilian fighters fight forward, even when losing, even when tired, they press on. Russia, the mountain forge. If Brazil gave MMA chaos, Russia gave it discipline and suffocation. Russian fighting doesn't begin in gyms with bright lights. It begins in the mountains, where kids grow up wrestling before they can even read. Two words describe the Russian approach: Sambo and suffocation. First came Sambo, the Soviet invention that fused judo, wrestling, and street fighting into a combat system designed for soldiers, not medals. It's raw, practical, and unrelenting. Throws, leg locks, strikes, everything allowed. Layered on top of that is freestyle wrestling, especially in regions like Dagestan and Chechnya, where grappling is more than a sport. It's culture. Children don't just train, they live it, testing themselves daily, against opponents, against gravity, against weakness itself. Enter Khabib Nurmagomedov. No trash talk, no showmanship, just relentless chain wrestling. He fought like he was running an assembly line. Takedown, trap, maul, repeat. Opponents didn't lose rounds, they lost hope. Khabib never fought angry. He fought with the calm efficiency of a man doing business. His heir, Islam Makhachev, carries the same blueprint, but with added layers: cleaner striking, better kicks, more polish. Where Khabib drowned you in pressure, Islam picks his angles and makes the suffocation look elegant. But Russia isn't all wrestle and maul. Fighters like Peter Yan brought sharp boxing and icy precision into the mix. If Khabib's game was drowning you in the deep end, Yan's was dissecting you punch by punch until nothing was left. Russian MMA isn't loud, it isn't flashy. It's a frostbitten handshake that never lets go. It's about dominance, about breaking rhythm, about making you miserable before ending the fight clean. For them, fighting isn't fun. It's duty, honor, and the eyes of the mountains watching back home. Ireland, range and rhythm. Ireland doesn't flood MMA with fighters. It sends waves that crash hard enough to change everything. The first wave had one name, Conor McGregor. When McGregor arrived in 2013, he brought more than knockouts. He brought theater. He called his shots, predicted his wins, then delivered with surgical left hands. His stance was wide, his movement karate-like, his counters pure boxing precision. He didn't chase chaos, he orchestrated it. Irish MMA at its best is about range and rhythm. Control the distance, bait the rush, punish the mistake. McGregor embodied it, but he wasn't the end. The new wave is Ian Gary. Taller, leaner, calmer. He fights like a stretched-out McGregor blueprint. Long jabs, step-ins, calculated feints, and precise counters. Less one-punch artist, more dismantler over time. What defines Irish fighters isn't overwhelming pace. It's sharpness, precision over volume. They sharpen their tools until every strike feels inevitable. But Ireland shares one weakness: grappling depth. Wrestling culture is nearly absent. Most Irish fighters travel abroad to plug that gap, leaning on defensive jiu-jitsu and strategies to get back to their feet. Their strength isn't in control, it's in survival and resetting to striking range. Irish MMA is built less on brute force and more on belief. From McGregor's grin to Gary's quiet confidence, they fight like men who were born to do this and who refuse to imagine another path. Georgia, the wrestling storm. While Ireland brings rhythm, Georgia brings a storm. Wrestling there isn't just a sport, it's survival, a cultural inheritance passed down like family names. Kids grow up not asking if they'll wrestle, but how soon. The Georgian style is built on relentless pressure, not fancy tricks, not wasted movement, just hips, pace, and punishment. Merab Dvalishvili is the storm personified. Nicknamed the Machine, he shoots takedown after takedown, clinch after clinch, scramble after scramble, never slowing, never stopping. He doesn't break rhythm. He creates one, dragging opponents into exhaustion until the fight is less about skill and more about survival. But Georgia's next wave adds more than just wrestling. Fighters like Ilya Topuria combine suffocating grappling with vicious striking, fast hands, knockout power, and the confidence of a man who knows he can dominate anywhere the fight goes. Then there's Guram Kutataladze, whose pace and aggression make every exchange dangerous. Georgian striking isn't always polished, but it's powerful. Every punch carries the weight of mountain-grown strength. It's not finesse, it's force. What binds Georgian fighters is national pride. They don't just fight for themselves. They fight for coaches, villages, families, and a culture that treats quitting as betrayal. Georgia doesn't play safe. It doesn't fight for decisions. Georgian MMA is about breaking the opponent's will, then finishing the job. China, the split path. The country's most famous martial artist never stepped inside a cage, yet his philosophy still shapes the fight game. Bruce Lee believed in adapting, blending styles, and removing limits. That blueprint lives in today's Chinese fighters, who are finally making their mark. Chinese MMA doesn't move in one direction. It splits into two very different roads. The first is Sanda, a combat system created for the Chinese military. It's fast, fluid, and explosive, a mix of boxing, kickboxing, and wrestling that launches fighters from kicks to takedowns in the blink of an eye. Hands are quick, kicks are sharp, and the trips and throws carry over perfectly into the cage. The second road is rooted in folk wrestling, preserved by ethnic minorities in the country's rural west. Young Kazakh and Mongol wrestlers learn their craft on dirt floors, their rules passed down through family and tradition. These fighters are raised in places where toughness isn't optional, it's survival. That's the paradox of Chinese MMA. The urban speed and flash of Sanda colliding with the raw grind of folk wrestling. Fighters like Zhang Weili embody this dual spirit. She's explosive, disciplined, and relentless, mixing power with combinations that flow like calculations. On the other side, wrestlers like Song Yadong and Sumudaerji bring the grit of small villages mixed with modern polish. They combine the patience of wrestling with the versatility of full MMA. Still, Chinese MMA is new. Most athletes are first generation. The infrastructure is developing, gyms are growing, and the talent pool is raw, but the hunger is undeniable. Mexico, the heart that never breaks. The Mexican fighting style doesn't come from fancy gyms or expensive camps. It comes from a boxing tradition built on toughness and pressure. In Mexican boxing, the rule has always been simple. Take one shot to give two. Not because it's reckless, but because it's relentless. Fighters like Julio Cesar Chavez turned body shots into poetry and taught a nation that walking forward through pain was the purest form of courage. When MMA arrived, Mexico brought that same spirit into the cage. Brandon Moreno, Mexico's first UFC-born champion, proved it on the biggest stage. He didn't win with brute force. He won with scrambles, energy, and refusal to break. Hurt him, and he smiles. Take him down, and he scrambles. Try to crush him, and he only comes back stronger. Then there's Yair Rodriguez, the chaos artist. His highlight reel looks more like a circus act than a fight. Spinning elbows, off-the-cage kicks, flying knees. Yair doesn't follow rules of space or rhythm. He invents new ones mid-fight, forcing opponents to chase him through madness. For years, Mexico lagged in grappling. Few wrestling rooms, fewer black belts. But that gap is closing fast. Fighters now travel abroad, bring elite coaches home, and combine Mexican toughness with international skill. The striking was always world-class. Now the ground game is catching up. One thing never needed fixing: the cardio. Mexican fighters don't gas out. They don't mentally fold. Even in defeat, they keep coming, wave after wave. Leave the door open for just a second, and a Mexican fighter will kick it down with everything they have left. Australia, composure and combat. Australian MMA didn't burst onto the scene with superstars. It started with leftovers, a few tough strikers fighting in small shows far away from the global spotlight. But distance breeds resilience, and Australia evolved faster than anyone expected. Now Australian fighters are known not for what they do, but for what they don't do. They don't panic. They don't rush. They don't waste energy chasing highlight reels. They wait, analyze, and decode until the right moment comes. Alexander Volkanovski is the purest expression of this style. Once a rugby player built like a tank, he doesn't explode blindly. He studies every round, every exchange. He gathers data. And when he has your pattern, the fight becomes checkmate. Then comes Jack Della Maddalena, who brings old-school boxing to the modern cage. High guard, crisp combos, surgical body shots. His fights look like fast-forwarded footage of a 1940s prizefighter. Efficient, ruthless, clinical, Australian striking blends Western kickboxing and Muay Thai, but with a local twist. Throw hard, but throw smart. Every shot is calculated. Every strike is clean. No wasted motion, no ego-driven chaos. For years, grappling was the weak link, but not anymore. Fighters now travel abroad, bring home elite coaches, and treat takedown defense like gospel. Volkanovski's ability to stuff Islam Makhachev for 4 rounds wasn't luck. It was preparation and system building. And when fights turn dirty, Australians don't fold. Fighters like Jamie Mullarkey and Tyson Pedro prove that when pressure comes, they bite down and fire back. It's violence held together by composure. USA, the Wrestling Engine. The United States didn't invent MMA, but it gave the sport structure. From UFC 1 onward, America brought its favorite weapon, Division I wrestling. American wrestling is a grind. It's endless takedowns, relentless top pressure, and ground and pound so punishing it makes opponents wish for quicker rounds. Fighters like Daniel Cormier, Chael Sonnen, and John Jones didn't just wrestle. They turned it into suffocation. Once on the mat, escape wasn't an option. But Americans didn't stop at wrestling. They weaponized transitions. Strike to wrestle to strike, punches to set up takedowns, takedowns to open ground and pound to force mistakes. Brazilians might hunt submissions. Americans prefer elbows and fists. Simple, brutal, efficient. The US also built the system around MMA. Gyms like American Top Team, AKA, and Jackson Wink became laboratories where strategy, cardio, and fight IQ were refined. Fighters weren't just trained, they were engineered for 5-round wars. And when it comes to striking, America is a melting pot. Boxing from Philly, kickboxing from LA, Muay Thai from Florida, every style found its place. That's why no 2 American fighters look alike. They aren't defined by a single style, they're defined by adaptation. Think of an American fighter as a quarterback reading defense. Every move is calculated, every adjustment made on the fly. Only here, instead of a touchdown pass, it's a knee to the ribs or a choke to the neck. United Kingdom, the working class striker. Before ground and pound or slick jiu-jitsu took over the cage, the UK was already exporting tough fighters. Not martial artists polished in clean dojos, but bare-knuckle brawlers and pub fighters. Men who traded blows in brick gyms and left with broken noses and scarred hands. At its foundation, British MMA is boxing first. Quick jabs, tight footwork, and an in-and-out rhythm that feels more like clockwork than chaos. UK fighters rarely look for one-punch knockouts. They grind you down, round after round, forcing you to fight at their pace pace until your will cracks. Michael Bisping was the first true prototype. No wrestling background, no black belt pedigree, just volume, cardio, and the insane grit to keep swinging, even when one eye was gone. He wasn't flashy, he was stubbornly functional, and that made him dangerous. But the style evolved. Leon Edwards represents the next chapter. Calm, calculated, and clinical. His Muay Thai is sharp, his timing sniper-like. He studies his opponents for minutes, downloading habits, waiting for the one window to end it all, like the head kick that froze Kamaru Usman in London and shocked the world. The UK still isn't known for world-class wrestling, but it has learned survival. Sprawl, scramble, reset, and drag opponents back into striking range. Their strength remains stand-up battles, where grit, technique, and working-class stubbornness shine through. British MMA is about fighters who didn't come from hype. They came from long bus rides, freezing gyms, and hard lives. They don't ask for glamour. They fight because that's what life taught them to do. Thailand and Myanmar, the striking bloodline. If there's a homeland for pure stand-up fighting, it lives between Thailand and Myanmar. Thailand gave the world Muay Thai, the art of 8 limbs, elbows that cut, knees that crush, and a clinch that smothers opponents until escape feels impossible. In Thailand, Muay Thai isn't just a sport, it's identity, discipline, and pride. Fighters who step into MMA bring with them sharp kicks, measured pressure, and a style where every strike has purpose. It's not reckless violence, it's controlled destruction. But adaptation has been slow. Muay Thai is king in the ring, but MMA asks for more than ropes and pads. The ground game is still a challenge. Clinch work translates, elbows and knees remain dangerous, but wrestling and submissions require years of adjustment. Thai fighters are learning, adapting strike by strike, grapple by grapple. Then comes Myanmar, where the rules are even harsher. Lethwei, the art of 9 limbs, adds headbutts to the arsenal. Bare knuckle, no gloves, no rounds. If there's no knockout, the fight is called a draw. It's not just sport, it's tradition, endurance, and pain tolerance at its peak. Fighters grow up embracing chaos, and when they cross into MMA, one thing is certain. They don't fear getting hit. Lethwei names like Dave LeDuc gave it international exposure, but more are stepping into cages worldwide. They carry heavy hands, iron chins, and relentless pressure. Where Muay Thai is structured and tactical, Lethwei is unpredictable and brutal. Together, Thailand and Myanmar form the two extremes of Southeast Asian striking. In MMA, that means dangerous elbows from Thai fighters and reckless forward pressure from the Burmese. They don't always outclass opponents with technique, but they deliver unforgettable fights. And as training camps add grappling into the mix, their threat will only grow. A Muay Thai master who learns to wrestle or a Lethwei brawler who picks up submissions isn't just a striker anymore. They're a walking weapon. Japan, the Philosophers fight. If Brazil birthed the ground game and America built the grind, Japan gave MMA its soul. Before the UFC ever existed, Japan was experimenting. Tudo, Pancrase, and later Pride weren't just promotions. They were laboratories for martial philosophy disguised as combat. The Japanese approach blended catch wrestling, judo, karate, and even theatrical elements from pro wrestling. But behind the spectacle, it was about strategy, creativity, and pushing the boundaries of what fighting could mean. Kazushi Sakuraba, the Gracie hunter, embodied this perfectly. He wasn't the strongest or the fastest, but he outthought opponents in real time. He baited, adapted, and submitted legends with a smile. For Japan, fighting wasn't just about winning, it was about testing ideas, solving problems mid-battle, and proving that intelligence could overcome brute force. Japanese MMA built itself on transitions, sweeps, and reversals. It's a style where you might lose a round but win the fight with one perfectly timed move. The striking roots came from karate, upright stances, precise timing, and sudden bursts of power. Fighters like Takanori Gomi turned accuracy into knockout bombs, while grapplers like Shinya Aoki twisted opponents into submissions that looked like puzzles more than techniques. Japan's global spotlight has dimmed since Pride's collapse, with the UFC pushing westward. But the philosophy is alive. Promotions like Risen keep the spirit burning, and gyms across Tokyo still raise fighters with the same respect, technical mastery, and curiosity that defined the old days. In Japan, fighting is more than chaos. It's clarity. Every risk carries a question. Every strike has intent. It isn't always efficient or dominant, but it's always beautiful, like chess played with sweat and scars.